Like Mia O'Connor, our next subject has cultivated a deep connection with the arts. At his workshop in the wooded outskirts of Corvallis, Oregon, Jeff Manthos finds joy and inner strength through handcrafting violins, a passion that has helped him push through some of his life's darkest moments. After serving in the Navy as an air crewman in the 1970s, violin maker Jeff Manthos went on to pursue a craft that would ultimately define his character.
I knew that I was not going to be a performer. I am not a player. I can play okay, but that's not my calling. But working with my hands is, and wondering what made a good violin work got me curious about that process. But I was just fascinated with the process of building one by hand and using techniques that are 400 years old. They have not changed. To make a handmade violin, tools are the same, the process is the same, the features are the same. So in effect, I'm trying to recreate what was done 400 years ago and do that well, which is a challenge.
After a lifetime of relocating, Manthos finally settled down in Corvallis.
I worked very hard to be able to come out to the Northwest. I was working in Los Angeles in a violin shop, and I came to a conference in 1986 in Portland and fell in love with the area. And it was November in an ice storm. So if I fell in love, under those circumstances, I thought, well, we're off to a good start.
Manthos sources wood from all around the world, but some of it comes from the lush forests found along the Oregon coast.
It is interesting that I do use domestic woods, Northwest wood. Sitka spruce, for example, grows up in the Northwest, fairly small area, but I like it. I use it in my violas quite a bit. And so there is that connection. If I see a Sitka spruce in the forest, I think, that could be a violin someday.
"14 years after Manthos moved to the Northwest, he faced a setback when he was diagnosed with Non Hodgkin's lymphoma.
So my reaction is probably different than a lot of other people's to having cancer. It was different enough that my doctor made note, and I think it made the rounds in their clinic, and he wrote down in the records, he said that I responded calmly and objectively to finding out that I had two kinds of cancer. It's just kind of who I am. I've worked on not being so self-contained. So the cancer diagnosis for me was like, okay, what do we do? Let's take care of this. I have cancer, let's fight it. And we did.
Manthos is currently in remission after his 4th relapse and has been writing a manuscript documenting his battle with the illness. He calls the memoir, Planet Chemo, Confessions of a Self-Contained Man.
The prologue goes, "It's not how much life I have left, it's how I live what life I have. This is a story of endurance, of patience, and of hope. It is a story of the will to survive and face life's uncertainties with a renewed passion for living in the moment and living in the love one receives. It is, in part, the story of my learning to accept that love."
After his 2nd remission, Manthos completed a violin that he will never sell.
One of my instruments, one hanging up, the middle instrument up there, is it's a reminder to me of my cancer journey. I started it before my diagnosis and had to put it aside and didn't work on it for, 8 or 9 months, something like that. Came back to it when I felt I was ready to, one, be around sharp tools. Infections are a big deal when you're in chemo, and also had the focus and the strength to work. And it ended up being a wonderful instrument. I love that instrument, and I don't want to part with it because it ties me into that.
Manthos is nearing retirement and doesn't make nearly as many instruments as he used to, but in the evenings, he still sits down at his workbench and carves away until a shape begins to emerge from the shavings.
I make a tool. I'm a tool maker. I make the violin, the tool for the musician to do that for themselves. And it's always a good sign. If a player has one of my instruments and they don't want to put it down, I figure that's it. I've done my job. And now it's up to them to develop their own sensibilities with the instrument, find their own voice with that instrument.
That's it for Northwest Stories. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. You can check out previous Northwest Stories segments by going to nwstories.com. We'll see you next year.